Ready to roll. Welcome everybody tonight. My name is Lou Jensen, and this is the weekly gathering of the I&E Network for Inspiration and Encouragement. We've been doing webinars together for this is our 8th year now, and trying to help people who are artistic individuals moving in the direction of doing a better job with their business side of their hobby. Start something fun, gradually move it into something productive. And been at it a long time. We started this in 1983. We have over 30,000 kits that we've sold around the world, and so we have a lot of fun mixture with people who, in this group, the film strip is full again tonight, with people who are really pretty determined now. Like the idea that they found something they can carve and engrave, or sandblasting, or airbrush, or whatever their hobby art direction is, and then gradually do a better job in the marketplace with that. And this series I started several years ago, and I'll gradually improve it each year, kind of tweak it each year to make it really appropriate to help you, first of all, understand pricing. It's just without a doubt, this is the want world. This is not things that people need. Yellow Pages is everything that people need, and that's location, 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 3 most important words in the need world. But over here in the want world, the 3 most important words are exposure, exposure, exposure. And it seems like it takes a while for people to sort this out. And I think artist types do the poorest job of all in trying to manage that area, because you just don't understand the difference in the 2 marketing approaches. So we had last week was step 1, or the first stage. Tonight I want to kind of launch now the second series. Oops, we don't want that one. We don't need that one. We need this one right here. Okay, greatest pleasure. Does that slide up for everybody to see the ordinary miracle?
Yep.
Okay, thank you much. If you meet people and you're watching the web and you see what's posted on Google Plus every day, as you go down through your individual stream, you have to realize that Google custom builds your stream for you every day. What you get is not what I get. What I get is not what someone else gets. Ron gets a separate stream of posts, and it's Google deciding the relationship, the connection, somewhat. It's so important that you begin to realize what's happening there, and that you can kind of cultivate your individual stream to your preferences. If you follow certain people who are doing certain things with their posting on average, you'll start to follow people that have a similar kind of interest as you. And this algorithmic, intuitive ability for the computers to begin to figure out what we like and what we prefer, and then feed us that kind of information, is really amazing to me in the marketplace. I've never seen anything like it ever. And so trying to figure out how to do this part of impressing, getting beyond yourself and figuring out, okay, this is what I can do, and basically surprising yourself even how much talent you really have and what that can ultimately grow into, is just without a doubt one of the best things I've ever bumped into. It allows you literally to find something you can dream about and aim the rest of your life toward, and that gives you an awful lot to chew on, a lot to consider. In 1983, we started building the high-speed air power carving tools and pushing them into the marketplace. And what I noticed was some people did quite well with the concept, and other people really struggled. And as we started pulling people together to try and go after the marketplace together, to me, that's still the best thing we've done in the entire shoot, over 32 years now we've been playing with this concept and idea. The Inspiration and Encouragement Network is, I think, an artistic segment or an artistic gathering, a cooperative, if you will, of like-minded people who are trying to do better with their art and their business. I call it the Handmade Crusade because as we start focusing our effort to protect and promote the fine arts of handmade things, the future that's coming is going to put a lot of pressure on handmade stuff. Will it survive? Will it be the kind of marketplace entity that it is now? Because really fine, artistically handmade things now are the world's greatest margin product on the planet. It's what every museum is jam-packed full of. And the question now is, as computers and robotics start making everything, will that hold? As we start talking about artists doing better in the marketplace, I always use the analogy of chess, because if you're playing chess with a plan and you have a plan of your action, the odds of you winning go way up. If you play chess by waiting till someone makes a move and then you decide what to move, you're always going to be behind. If you started this series with me last week, I'm going to really encourage you to stay with it and get all of these shows in. So we've got 2 shows on pricing, 3 shows on upscale marketing, and then another 3 shows on branding. Out of all that I do each year, this is the series that I think is most important, that will literally help you to do a better job of your business and your marketing. There are 2 ways to spell successful. And if your success in life doesn't have the dollar signs going with it, then maybe there's something you could learn to do and pull it into a little bit better direction. I like to talk about this because alchemy is one of my favorite words. Turning nothing into something of value is alchemy. The old philosophy that you could take piece of lead and turn it into a gold was what was floating around in the world in the Middle Ages. And there's so many occasions where most great ideas come along, they are just exactly like that. To begin with, they're just an idea. No real income underneath it at all. And yet what I've learned is one good idea will lead to another, which will lead to another, which will lead to another, that gives you a chance to really take any concept that you bump into that you want to turn into reality and basically put it in the checkbook is possible. I've been fleshing out a book called Drawn Not Driven because I think it's such a huge change in thinking. The real value in this life is not all the stuff and the power we can pull into our lives. It's found, however, within. We are each here to discover, develop, master, and share. Learn to share what we've gained as some kind of talent. And if you watch really carefully your own individual preferences, the things that really turn you on, the stuff that you really, really like to play with, is these threads of interest. And if you'll literally look inside, search inside, listen to those whispers that come along about those threads of interest, it will help you find this great purpose. Part of what we do in this getting together is to help look at direction. What way can I go to try and make this a fulfilling part of my life? I quote Emerson a lot. I think Emerson was one of the smarter philosophers that we've ever had in America. And he said, what lies in our future pales in comparison as to what yet lies within. I don't think there's anything better than that. That is exactly the value to each of us. What we have and understand and have learned about living really can help other people take on their lives. So as you start looking for that something unique, this is mostly for people that are new, that are over on YouTube or on Google Plus watching the show tonight. God, I can't imagine you taking on something as a rest of your life kind of cause that wasn't fun and enjoyable. And it sure ought to be satisfying and worthwhile. It really helps if it's creative and challenging. And if you begin to discover you have a little talent and interest in that direction, the second it begins to make money, oh my God, things are amazing. My first show I did, Carved Eggshells, did a show in Park City. And it's a disastrous show, but I managed to stay with it, and I made $3,400 in 2 days selling carved eggshells, and I was hooked from then on. I just went, oh my good Lord. I didn't dare tell anybody I was a retired dentist or a dentist, that I was a full-time dentist at the time, but it sure did encourage me to move forward with something that was not only fun and enjoyable, but it was money that was just unbelievable to me right from the very beginning. Tonight, as we take on part two, we're going to talk about how to practically go after this. I stretched your thinking last week and tried to range from most of our thinking as hobbyists and artists is on the lean side of the marketplace and the economy. And it's because we come after everything with the eyes of a consumer. We've grown up as consumers, and the job of the consumer is trying to get the best quality for the least price. And the job of the producer is exactly the opposite. Yes, quality, but decent price, and you got to have some money left over when you get done with the whole process so that you can then grow and continue the business. And that profit margin that allows you to do that is what most consumers don't even consider. So as we go into this, the ABCs, XYZs of how to do this, we're going to look at time and materials and price per hour. We're going to look at comparative prices of similar products. We're going to look at whatever the market will bear. We're going to look at the customer when the customer's coming to you. And then people that you bump in that just can't live without your product, where price is not the object any longer, and then cost of doing business. This is the tricky one right here. Most don't measure very carefully what the cost of doing business is. And then your personal value, which is the X factor, is when you have value yourself. People buy what you do because of you. So if we go in and look at time and examples and the push factor, the path, the desire, the cost, and the value, then you can come down and begin to get closer to an actual price. As we talked about last week, it's often mentioned that most of us just kind of pull a price out of the air. We really don't know what things ought to cost in this world. If you say, what should be the price of a custom-made gun? I've got a buddy that sold his business for a couple $100 million. All he does is hunting. That's all his other interests are. And his custom handmade guns are $100,000 a piece. $100,000 a piece, and he doesn't even blink. It's so interesting because I love custom cars and old cars, and I've met lots of people who spend $10,000, $20,000 on paint job alone for their custom done car. We've got people on our network that have made and sold furniture in the $70,000 to $80,000 per piece range. If you go ask somebody to help you write a book, oh Lord, is that expensive. I had a lady when I was getting ready to do Opportunity Intersection. She says, oh yeah, I've got a friend that can help you put the book together, but she's $50,000 retainer. And then she would help me do a book. Can you imagine the range of custom homes? It's easy to find a home in Park City that's $10, $20, $30 million. And we talked last week about handmade watches, and we've talked about do a hot rod for you, building custom hot rod, custom bike. Jay bumps into a lot of people who have custom motorcycles made, and my good Lord, they're getting expensive. Then if you want to go on a custom trip, custom vacation, and really be pampered, really taken care of, things get really expensive when you start moving into this custom want world, okay? When I went approached KSL in Salt Lake to do my first video in 1984, I think it was. I needed a video to help sell the equipment, and I thought that I probably ought to get a 2-hour video to go with the drill. So I asked them what that would be, and they told me it was $1,000 a finish minute. And that was clear back then. $120,000 for 2 one-hour videos on a commercial basis. And if you look at all of that and then begin to try and consider when you're starting a business and getting into business, generally the costs are just unbelievable. If you were to take a monthly cost checklist and go down through and fill in the blanks here, every one of you are avoiding all of these because you're doing it as a hobby from your home. And so all of a sudden you shortchange and cut out of a normal business startup all of those issues that would really be a challenging thing. Clear back in 2009, when I started building this particular series, the Kauffman Foundation said that cost was just over $30,000 to start a small business on average. Most franchise companies require a franchisee to pay a one-time initial fee, and so you can have, in some cases, $10,000, $15,000, clear up as high as $100,000 for getting into some kind of franchise. When you go through and look at all the possible franchises here, every one of them are in things that people need. This is the entire yellow pages of the marketplace. Everything that people needs. And I'm going, oh, don't start a business in the world of needs. God, it can be just amazing. Here's the maid's service. This is a franchise for cleaning. $100,000. Flip-flop shops, okay, water, anything to do with water is $100,000. Embroidery Me, brand recognition industry, $45,000. Signorama, sign business, financial success, but it's $50,000 up front. Tax service, you can get in the tax service business for $100,000. Global garage flooring. This is actually a really hot little business now. A lot of people going in and having their garages resurfaced and having fancy floors put in. Property management, $40,000. Highly profitable ice cream franchise for $100,000. Pro Sheds, specialized in on-site shedding for the secure, distinct recycling of confidential doctrine, or shredding. You got to look at that a little closer. Shredding business, $250,000. Are you kidding me? Farm Boy, grown to become a Southern California icon for $300,000. So prices to be in business are all over the place, and you literally could start a business around any concept. You could take the most unlikely idea and say, I think there's a need for this. I think I can probably drive it into a business. But based on what it takes you to get involved in the business is where most people draw the line. They just can't come up with enough money to get going. McDonald's is an extremely well-known, very productive franchise, but it generally is $600,000–$700,000 to $1.5 million to get one going. So let's take our concept and play with it here a little bit. This is a training pattern that Keith has had for a long time. Keith and Craig use this, and this is kind of an intermediate to an advanced level kind of power carving session, usually 3 or 4 days, and they teach you how to get into this heavy relief. And yet if you tried to come in and say, well, how much, if we had someone says, oh God, I want to buy that, if this was on display somewhere and someone said, how much is it, how would you begin to know what to price this? There's nothing else like it out in the marketplace to compare to, so it really starts to present some tough issues. Whatever is the really challenging part of thinking in this business is on the trading side of the table of the producer. The goal is to make as much as you can. And yet, if you start looking at everything as to what's fair, and you start measuring against your own perspective and basis of perspective, you're usually going to be way, way off. And yet, if you charge too little, then all you're doing is just barely making ends meet. So this idea of what can I do to improve that? How can I look at the pricing and get it into a position where it's on a little better basis? You've got the consumer who wants it as low as they can get it, and the producer who's trying to get as much as they can trade it for. So this antagonistic role is really important, that you get on the side of the producer and realize what you have to get for something in order to do the trade. It's okay to have a consumer object to your price and walk away. It's really quite important that that happens, actually. By the time you mix all these into that carving of piece, and you start trying to come up with all of these is a factor. All of these influence the decision as to what should that sell for. Okay, so it's a piece of alder, and there's probably Keith could do that carving in 2 or 3 hours, I think, and I'm sure he charges $100 an hour. So material costs would probably be maybe $12, let's say, and then $300 for his time. So that number would be about $312. Compared to anything else that's out there like it. Now, this is where it's fun in the world of want, because it's hard to find something that's comparable, because the price of comparable things will be all over the place as well. So this one is just going to enhance that number. Should never take it down. If this number, time, and materials is up in this range, don't you dare bring it down, because it seems like there's other things in the show that would be less expensive. If that's true, then you're in the wrong show. You need to be in a show where things are more expensive than what you have. Whatever the market will bear is, at any given moment, you could say, well, I want $1,000 for it. And then the choice is whether to hold that price and try and get it, or whether not. It's the most interesting thing to watch as a person masters some subject, and they start really selling their work for significant amounts. Almost always there's a period of time where we mix pretty aggressively, because they don't dare charge enough. They really struggle with that. And so whatever the market will bear is very hard for consuming mentality. Most of us just can't bear to charge too much. There's a really unique category, and that's when the customer's heard about you and is coming to you wanting you to do something for them. Jay's doing a lot of motorcycles, and he's starting to have that repeat customer kind of, they saw him before, or they've heard about him before, and they're coming into your life saying, I need you to do my custom motorcycle. Boy, that is just about the best category on the planet, because all of a sudden now the price takes a way less significant position, because they want it done. They're already coming to you. This is also in the category. Every now and again, I'd find somebody that would see my artwork, my carved eggshells at the show, and they have everything else. Everything else. They got so much money, and they've never seen a sculpted eggshell. And I would call it the world's most delicate artwork, and it would just light some people up and they would see it every day I was at the show, and then come back and finally, I just got to have it. I just can't live without it. That X factor is so much fun to play with, because then price is not an issue at all. This is the subtle one. This is how hard it is to do in business. If you're going to do shows and you're traveling and you've got flight costs, or you've got driving costs. Whatever it costs you to be in business has to be computed into this time and materials, price per hour kinds of ideas, because if all of these aren't influencing your price, you're probably going to come up short. Now, the last one is your personal value. And that personal value means that if Keith Hone did it and I'm selling it, then things are completely different than anyone else, because the Keith Hone signature here and a date on it automatically changes the value of this piece. Because there's a whole world out there that Keith has influenced with 30 years of doing this kind of work. And when he does something, or Craig Hone does something, or Al Hone does something, anything with a signature and a name from the Hone Zone on it is going to make the value 3 and 4 times as much as it would be for all the rest of us. So, material examples, lift, path, desire, cost, and value. You start coming up closer and closer and closer to some kind of price that you can measure. And if you'll start getting used to doing these measurements every time you come into the pricing of what you're going to end up with, the more you do and measure it against these measurements, the better you're going to get at it. The better you're going to get at figuring out, okay, now what should it cost? The door this is Craig's first major carving, his sculpture, first architectural piece. This was a 8-inch thick piece of solid walnut, custom handmade door for a $4 million home up in Bear Lake. And I watched him do the clay and figure out what he wanted to carve, and then I watched him carve it, and God, about killed us all when it drove off to go be installed. But did he have a tough time with the pricing? Oh, this is the time that really pushed him hard. And so we constantly spent time in measuring all of those comparisons, trying to find anything that even was close to compare it to in price. Then one day we came up with the idea of having it appraised as a piece of art. And so Craig had come up with the highest price he could possibly imagine was $36,000. And that's where he finally settled. He was going to charge this guy $36,000 for this front door. And the guy didn't even blink. That's great. Get her done. So then we went and had it appraised. And we had 2 different appraisals done by art dealers. And one appraised it for $110,000 and the other for $140,000. It's just wrecked Craig's emotions because he was having a hard time with it being $36,000, and yet the second the guy signed the check to pay Craig, he made nearly $100,000 in equity on the value of the store. It's become famous in our area now because it's just got such an amazing factor to it. And if you come in and push these into your thinking, make each of these things fit somehow. Look at it and decide, what could I charge? What should it be worth? Now, Craig has a name and reputation because this is Bob Allen, a famous author in California, lives next to Oprah Winfrey in his big fancy house. And he came to Craig. He saw him in an article in a magazine and then came to him and said, I want you to do a new fireplace, custom fireplace for me, and this is solid walnut as well. And by the time he went through all these individual factors and put the whole equation together, he came up with $70,000 for the fireplace. Now, from $36,000 for a piece to $70,000 for a piece takes quite a bit of personal thinking. Change in your own thinking is what has to happen. And it's really hard if you haven't considered all these elements and then begin to realize now when Craig is asked to do a commission and a custom piece, we've done nothing but promote his name and reputation now for 20 years. Won national titles. He's just done everything he could do to elevate who made it. And all of a sudden then this category starts to take over. And when that category, every time you get a piece of exposure, I would encourage you to reevaluate each of these factors and then plug this one in and raise your prices again. exposure then begins to elevate that price and value. Excuse me. Mike got a chance to do a bottle, or a box, a decorative box for $1 million bottle of wine. And he had the worst time coming up with the price. And so I got on the phone with him, and we spent several days trying to help him go back through these factors till he could come up with some kind of pricing. And he was getting closer and closer to where he had to lay the price down for the designer. And so finally, one night I says, well, listen, come up with the highest price you can possibly think of. Well, let's hit this in the morning. And he just couldn't see charging over $10,000. And I says, Mike, it's $1 million bottle of wine. It's got to be more than that. I says, at least double that much. And then we backed it off $3,000, gave him a discount of $3,000 down to $17,000 for access, ongoing access to the information and the pictures and the information about the project. And so this part down there with that job didn't have anything to do with it. No one knew who Mike was yet. But he's done several boxes since, and now the whole world knows that he does that kind of thing. And so all of a sudden you've got who made it begins to really, really make a difference and make a dent. Now, this is a piece that I did for my wealthy client and patron. This is his gift to his daughters. And it was really fun. I did one for each of his 2 girls. And when I get into this kind of thing with Jack, Jack has 250 pieces that are about $25,000 a piece in his personal collection. And you know that kind of thing is how he lives and what he buys and what he cares for. Then my pricing in here is just ridiculous. It doesn't matter. Just all but doesn't matter. I can go down through each of these lists and begin to look at this one right here is probably going to put that piece in a very, very expensive category. And then I've been doing crystal flooring for about 30 years. Jay did this piece. Jay, can you get your mic on for a second? Do you remember doing this one? I'm sure you do.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember what you charged to do it? Roughly.
Roughly 300.
Okay. Would you do it for 300 now?
No.
Okay. That's the right answer. That's the right answer. And automatically you begin to sense a difference in your position in the marketplace, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
You're playing on a whole different field now. And all these factors we've talked about that begin to influence your pricing, did they come to you, didn't they? They come and say, can you do this for us?
Yeah. It was actually kind of a roundabout way. A friend of mine goes to that winery quite a bit, and he talked to him and showed him some work, you know, that I've done and all that, and pictures. Then they contacted me and kind of back and forth. So.
Okay. Excellent. 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 That's the right answer. Thank you. So if you go through and consider the time and materials may not change, similar to something else may not change, you play with this highest price you can possibly think of that might work and sell. It's usually, if it's a commission piece, I'll always raise the price to some degree because it has this desire factor. Now, the hassle factor is a really unusual category. When I see something based on my experience, I know it's going to be more difficult, then I start raising the price dramatically, because the worst thing you can face is to misjudge how much time and how much trouble it's going to take you to do that job. I'm going to show you a little later a job I did for Queen Elizabeth and the city of Calgary, Canada, and it just got the hassles on that project, went clear through the roof, and so then did my price. And your current hourly rate. Now, this is kind of just the bottom line of your time. And if you're below $60 an hour or below $1 a minute, I want you to bust your butt this year to move your prices closer to $60 an hour. If you're making less than $60 an hour, you're losing ground. And $1 a minute is pretty good for custom engraving, custom personalization that we play with. Then, as you get any publicity, I'm going to do a show in a little bit here in the spring to teach you how to get exposure, how to get things published about yourself. And every time that happens, then you want to try and nudge that a little bit higher. If you realize the whole want world is all based on expectation and perception, its uniqueness, its availability, all those kinds of things really do raise the price of things. And when you're learning how to price, you have to kind of sit back after you've come up with some kind of price. Then you're automatically going to measure it in your mind. Will it sell? Will it sell at the price that I've kind of come to? And every one of us struggle with this, trying to raise the price. Super easy to bring the price down, but it is just a pain to lift the price and elevate the price. And every one of you will struggle with the price of something. Mix with Tam on the phone, or call Ron or Mel. All of us use every resource we can think of to kind of come up with the price. And then we'll finally lay the price down to the customer, and we'll say, yeah, it's $600. And the first words out of their mouth will be, oh, God, that's great. I thought it was going to be $900. It's so funny to bump into that, because in this world, the perception of what it ought to cost is usually different than what we think it is, because we're coming at it from a consumer. And if you can get the experience of someone else to help you in this process, to help you kind of figure out what should the price be, it makes it so much easier. And because we're a long-term organization, we got a lot of people out there playing with every one of these areas that would know. Robert Lee could help you with the pricing with custom carving on a guitar. Mel could help you in the world of jewelry. Ken Brown and Ron could talk to you about the pricing of calligraphy on perfume or on crystal, or doing wedding kind of things. We've got someone in all these areas of interest that really do make a huge difference when you're trying to figure out, what am I going to do and how am I going to price it. I try and have all of you pay attention to Howard. Howard Interpreting is just without a doubt the one flat artist that has a lot of brass. And I was in Phoenix when he raised his first piece over $100,000. All the cowboy artists were gradually charging more for their work, getting a little more demand for what they're doing. And then this one show, he raised his price over $100,000. And everybody hit the ceiling because they thought he'd outpriced it, that he pushed it too far. And it sold. So all of a sudden, Howard kind of had a head of steam going underneath his stuff. And now he routinely gets $1 million an original. $1 million. So how things sell and what goes on in the marketplace is really something that's hard to realize and hard to keep your head in the game. They sold at this auction 300 works for $17 million. And it was somehow up from last year or the year before, several million more. I can show you pieces of antiques, and particularly Indian-related artifacts, that are just absolutely getting more and more and more expensive. And so when you start seeing that someone else can make that kind of thing work, then you have to start remembering of other people that have made things work in their own niche. This is Sam Maloof, and a Sam Maloof chair is easily $25,000, $30,000 now. It's his style, it's his design, and he stayed with it for his whole entire life. 3 U.S. presidents had a piece of his work. Elongated rockers resemble an archer's bow, but the intentional curve to keep the chair from tipping over. A single push will let it rock for 4.5 minutes. Price starts at $22,000, increasing to $42,000 for a model. zircon wood from Belize. But what would you charge? How would you come up with some kind of a price range? And if you didn't put it through all these factors I've been presenting to you, you're really going to struggle. You're going to have a hard time coming up and keeping up with the price range and having it work out as you want it to. When you're playing with a lemonade stand and having the price of lemonade, how should you price it, is really a challenge and kind of constantly stays that way. I've been doing crystal for quite a long time, and Glenn Beck did his first major gathering at the mall in Washington. It's called Restoring Honor. And I did some piece for him to give away to people that were participating and contributing to that kind of. This is a crystal book. It's a big, thick chunk of crystal, and then I etch on there whatever they want to have said and put in there. And you have to kind of really spend some thoughtful time trying to evaluate how many pieces am I going to do, for who am I doing it for, what kind of activity. This was a big deal. He really got a lot of people who attended this first function. And then I have the advantage of knowing more what goes on in the general marketplace. When you're a beginner, you don't know those things. But as you move further and further and further into it, you'll start to see things like Steuben in New York. When they were in business, they charged $400 a block for these little crystal blanks. So this was $1,200 for an Amy's name etched on a crystal block for her. The cost of that little block for me is $10. And it's one blast. Look at it. It's not even involved that much. Erica, I preach about this girl constantly because of what she's doing. She takes this little 8.5-inch crystal bowl, writes one sentence around the top of that crystal rim, and she gets $150 for 10 minutes worth of work. It's now gone clear up to 160, I think, the last time I saw it. So when you can see things that people are doing, and they're doing really well with it, then that will start to give you a little bit of a handle on what could I maybe charge. So when I know what Ken Brown charges, I know what Ron charges to do calligraphy. I came up with the idea of doing in between crystal that Erica does and a forever letter. I can do a forever letter on crystal for somebody for $150, and I can do about 4 of them an hour. But I can do it with sandblasting and do 3 of them an hour. And you really have to kind of realize what you're playing with here. When I can put someone's love letter on a piece of crystal for them and get that same kind of price range, things really, really are fun in the marketplace when this is not even, no one, not one person has called up and complained about the price. I'm sure there's a few that said, oh, I'm not going to pay that much. But the ones who called up and priced it didn't even blink. And this full-page ad, this was an editorial comment. If I'd had to pay for that page, it would have cost me 80 grand, gang. This is Bon Appetit. This is a very, very expensive magazine. And it would cost me $80,000 to have that page, and I got it for free. And I don't know how many forever letters I've done in my career, but a bunch, an absolute bunch. And every now and again I think, well, I got to get out there and nudge it a little bit longer, a little bit further. But everyone, when you find a niche that is really appealing to you, I sold our systems to a family in Denver, and their son was somewhat disabled, and he started sandblasting beer mugs for the taverns in the local area. And then he finally got to where he was just banging them out like crazy. And he called me on the phone one day. He says, Doc, I've just paid 80 acres. I bought a cash for an 80-acre ranch in Nebraska with these silly beer mugs. And so it's a matter of figuring out what can I do and find out if you can make it work, and then just keep nudging it further and further up. Your job as the producer is to constantly think, how could I make it and sell it for more? And so I've experimented. I've never pushed this one on into the marketplace of selling the Forever Letter at a jewelry store, but I know flat out it would work. I'd take these flat, big glass pieces, these three-quarter inch pieces of crystal, and put that same Forever Letter in here. I usually do a border out on the front and then put the letter on the back. Then they can be lit from the sides, and oh boy, they're just stunning. It's just all perception. And when the want world is all perception, the customer can't measure it against anything else. And so it leaves the pricing so much more open. If you're going to sell toothpicks or bottled water or beer or anything, there's a general range of price. And that general range of price, everyone is pretty much familiar because it's things that they need. But in the want world, it's just this whole other deal. It's just wide open. But if you keep coming at it when you're in charge of this pricing department and you leave it to, oh, I want to be fair, Mom always told me how to determine the value, or I hate to gouge on your pricing. This is soft. This is not a good way to measure your pricing and manage your business as a whole. I have several shows I do during the year where I constantly bring up these gears, because these are all the hats that every small business owner should wear. All the things that you really need to pay attention to. But that little guy right there, if your pricing is off, this one is going to really slow down your entire productivity of your business. Why do it and lose money? It just does not make any sense at all. And the truth is, most people guess at retail. So put your old consuming mentality back away and really come at this from a perspective saying, well, I don't know so much now, but I'm going to get better, and I'm going to get better, and I'm going to get better at my pricing. The hardest mentality in these two sessions I presented is this idea that you've got to do better with your numbers. You have to make your numbers. If it's perception, do you want 2 and 2 to come out at 3? Or do you want it to come out 2 and 2 is 4? Or is there some way you can stretch what you're doing and move it up to 5? And if you're not constantly looking at it, it's so easy to drift back into 2 and 2 is 4. It's really important to try and see if you can't figure out, how can I upsell? How can I move the perception of my work and what I'm trading in the marketplace up and up and up? And if you don't think uniquely, you're really going to struggle, okay? Now, the 3% Club I talk about all the time. These are ongoing, successful in their own business. And we've got quite a few in our network now who've had an ongoing, successful business. And if you can realize that what does it cost to find a customer, that there's savings when you have a one-time customer turns into a repeat customer. It's just the most amazing little transition in business to realize it's so much easier to sell something again to the same customer than it is to go out and spend all the money and time and effort to go out and find a brand new customer. So this taking care of your customers is just huge. If you're the kind of person that makes it and sells it and then makes another one and sells it and then makes another one and sells it, you need to rethink what you're doing. And how can I move this into a position where I'm going to make more money with my time and not have to keep spinning my wheels? Take money to make it, it costs money to sell it. It costs money to make it, it costs money to sell it. And so getting it over to the oil well, where it's producing on a little bit better basis than that is the real goal. When Jamie White started, she took classes from Keith and got started. She was a truck driver. She hauled rock for Geneva Stone, and whole career truck driving. Now she has a killer cabin and lives down in Richfield, and her best gun so far is 2200. But if you sense that you could do more or learn to do more, she's really had a lot of fun developing her individual skills. But what should a piece be like this? Now, this is a piece of crystal I did for the university. They had a big conference in Jordan, and there was 121 representatives came to that conference. It was Prince Ghazi of Jordan held the conference, and I talked the university and was invited from the Mormon Church, and I talked them into 121 pieces of these crystal blanks. So under the circumstances of 121 pieces, then coming up with an individual price for an amateur, a brand new person, would be pretty challenging to figure out how can I manage here. So if you come back to this time and materials, similar to something else, the highest price you can imagine, is it a commission piece? Because this time it was, okay? They came to me and wanted it done. That also elevates it. There's a huge desire factor with crystal. It really is a fun product to play with. I didn't see any hassles, so I didn't bump the price because of that. And then I mixed into it my currently hourly rate, and I ignored on that order. I ignored who made it. And when you can get some experience and some judgment, a way to kind of come at things, you will change your whole mentality of how to price something. When Brittany came to take her classes and learn to do airbrushing, her grandfather paid for her classes. She was just young, I think 12 or 14, and she did really, really well. And so just before she left, I sat down with her, and I said, Brittany, I want you to do, when you start doing portraits for anybody, start at 3,000 each and go up. Well, she didn't know to do that or not know to do that. And so her grandfather took her into the bank and introduced him to her banker, and the banker said to Brittany, he says, my gosh, you've done beautiful work. He says, you've done better than the oil that I just had done for the bank. He says, can I hire you, Brittany, to do my portrait? And the words right out of her mouth were, yeah, you bet, but I charged $3,000 to start. And it's just interesting how if you have a little bit of pizzazz in you, just something of a okay with me doing it, and you start doing things in the marketplace, then the perception of your work actually goes up. And Brian has gone on and gone on and gone on with his work and his pricing. His daughter's won her first art show. How do you think he's going to try and begin to talk to her about what something ought to be, how much it ought to cost? When Mary Hogue started her studio and started carving gourds, and they got her up on the web, she actually got an order off of her website for 2 of her pieces for $3,500 a piece. And I know so many people who do gourd art that would not dare charge $3,500 for it. And yet it was actually the Smithsonian that said, we want 2 of your pieces on permanent display in the Botanical Gardens in Washington. So it's a matter of knowing and a degree of confidence to where you begin to look at what the possibilities are. Ben's first foray into the marketplace, I helped with that moment because he didn't know what to charge for his wood turning pieces that he pierced. and we finally settled on a price of $3,000. And he went to the Chicago show in Chicago, first show, and didn't sell a piece, not one piece all weekend. And so when he called me Monday, he was pretty upset that we'd overpriced it. He said, "I think I could have sold him and done better." And I made him promise he'd stay at $3,000. Well, the very next day, the buyer from Saks, was it Saks? One of the big department stores. No, not Dillard's. I'll think of it in a little bit. Called him and said he was opening up new art departments in each of these stores, and he needed several pieces for each of these stores. And so Ben called me. He says, "What should I do with the pricing? Isn't this wholesale?" I said, No. Stay right at $3,000 a piece. And the guy paid $3,000. His first order was 90 grand. And that show that the day before, he didn't think he'd done very well with. So each of you will come up to these occasions and these circumstances where you're trying to figure out, how can I price something? How can I come up with something that's reasonable, that might actually work? 20 hours on the gun at $60 an hour is going to be $1,200 on the gun. And when you begin to realize that you can do this kind of work for this kind of price range, it will give you a great deal of confidence to know that there's a whole bunch out there that are doing that well and better, way better, way, way, way better than those numbers. So last week I showed you this girl's beginning artwork with her gourds and how little she charged for them and what I think that really does represent. And then I show you somebody like Mary that can do this, actually the same amount of work, and get $3,500 a piece. So there really is no price to anything. There is no value. Not really. You have to have something that then begins to determine, well, what is the price? What is the value? I've got a lady that called me out of the network, and she carved an exact copy of one of my eggs, and she knew that I charged $10,000, so she suddenly said, "I'm going to charge $10,000," and absolutely nothing happened. And it's so interesting to me that people can't spot that difference in what we're talking about here, of saying, well, if Keith Holm can charge that much for this, then how does that then begin to influence my own individual prices? Lance, can you open up your microphone and talk a little bit about how being a part of the network has influenced your pricing, and especially when you've started to lift your prices higher and higher? Has it helped?
It's helped incredibly, because having someone you can bounce off ideas, pricing, just give me some ideas on how you look at things as far as price. It really helped a lot, because well, one of the first full gun stocks I did, I just didn't feel that I could charge more than about $300.
Yeah.
And that's what I quoted him. And when I was done, I said, "I'm never going to do that for less than $50."
Yeah.
Oh my God, was that long?
Yeah.
But it's to the point now that I really have a feel for it. With guns, you got to take into account the cost of the gun, what type of wood it is, things like that. But I have no problem with people walking away from a quote. It doesn't bother me whatsoever.
You have to get to that mentality. It's got to be price. If someone jumps on your price too quickly, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
You better rethink some things if they're going, "Yeah, I'll take two."
Oh, that was just really good. I thought it would be a lot more expensive. Than you need to be rethinking your position dramatically.
Well, and everybody fights somebody who knows what they're talking about on pricing. I fought you because I said, "I can't possibly charge that much," and then the guy says, "No problem."
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if you finally said, "No, well, present it. This is what you really got to do," and no problem whatsoever.
Yeah, it's just an amazing position when you start moving, even with something as simple. When I did these plates, I did a lot for the scouting world. I was council president, and the president of the council moved to Texas to take over all of scouting. And I used to do these wooden card plates were his thank yous. And he called up and said, I want to give all my thank yous while I'm president here. I want you to do them. Well, I couldn't do them all. It was just too much. So I gave it to my son Christopher, and we took every pattern that we did and got it to a point where he could bang this out in 1 hour. Do all the carving, do all the finishing in 1 hour. And then I talked the council or the national committee into prepaying him every year. We decided they'd probably do about $3,500 worth of plates a year, and so they would pay Chris in January, and we would give them a discount price if they would prepay the year. And they did it. And the kid was 16 years old banging it out. It was so fun to watch him get some savvy about what he was playing with, and then watch his numbers and make sure he was staying within the price range that we had quoted so that he could make that work. There's one wonderful exception, and that's when someone is pushing you off a cliff. With personalization, these sometimes contracts and stuff come into your life where something is needed to be done, and then they keep dinking around with it. They can't make up their mind. They can't decide what they want. It's usually a government entity, from what I found. And we were doing 800 crystal vases for Queen Elizabeth as a toast to her when she was being honored in Ontario. And they wanted everybody to take the glassware home with them to that night. So I pulled the step. Everybody at work got a chance to help. I think it was 32 cases of crystal that we got done. And they cut it so close we had to ship these FedEx overnight from Utah to Ontario to get 32 cases of crystal there in time. And the shipping alone cost them a flippin' fortune. But between the beginning of the price and they kept delaying it, I doubled my fees. So there's all kinds of occasions here that are going to affect your pricing. Major moments like this one, I carved a walking stick for Steven Spielberg for the National Boy Scout Jamboree, and I gave it to him. I didn't charge him a dime. But the very next day, I got this colored photograph in the national press for Spielberg walking with my work. And so the times to give it away, they're there. They're promotional moments that doesn't matter 1 minute. For what you've got invested and what you've got involved with, that's just fine. But there's other moments when you really can get a lot for what you do. I got a chance to go with Fred. Fred's a Tony Award-winning director of the founder of the Utah Shakespearean Festival. And got to go to Jerusalem with Fred and make that trip with him. Got to know him years ago. And every personal gift, thank you gift from him is one of these crystal books. And I charge a lot to do them. Those kind of accounts and those kind of relationships begin to change your thinking. Denny's our leader, has been our leader in the gourd carving art thing for, forever. And he is generally in the 20,000 per piece range anymore. And all of a sudden now, the fact that it's a Denny Wainscott piece, the fact that it's a Darwin Dower piece, the fact that it's a Craig Hone piece, it's going to start influencing your work, Lance. It's going to really start influencing your work, Jay. It already influences Ron and Mel's work. You just have to realize that you're the person that's got the hat on the pricing. You have to be able to move it forward and move it upward. We did these two pieces for President Bush and Orrin Hatch, the senator from Utah. And they were given to those circumstances so that Marilyn could then say, I've done pieces for the president and for Senator Hatch. And then we raised her prices of her work then. Marilyn went down, we went down, did a show together at the International Gourd Art Festival so that she could push her name and her reputation a little bit further. And almost everybody says, well, it's the quality of the work. That's all there is to it. And I'm going, oh, please don't price things that way. In the want world, that's an issue. There's no question. You can't be a klutz and doing the work. But it still isn't the only thing that influences the pricing. And don't be in this I don't know category. Literally begin to sharpen the saw, learn how to come in here and be really savvy with what your pricing is. And don't get caught here. The job of the consumer is to drive the price down, and the job of the producer is to drive the price up. ROI is a business term, and it's called return on investment, and it's really hard for most small business people to measure ROI until you get to some degree of experience and background. When you've been doing it a little while, then you really need to sit down every now and again and look at the price that you charge, measure it against every one of those variables, and see what you really put into that price, and begin to see if that's where it ought to be, or if you can literally need to change your price and raise it up. The thing that I want you to go away with tonight is you don't have to do it alone. I think the I&E network and belonging and mixing with us as a bunch is still a really valuable thing. If we could help you save the price of even one thing by interacting with us, would not that be worth our membership? I just sit and think, all it would take is an improved price on one damn thing to change the quality of your business and your relationship. The second thing to remember is measure it. Don't just guess. Sit down and put a pencil to what, why, when, where, how, and who. Look at those things more carefully. And then target your efforts. Don't just throw mud on the wall. Artists and craftspeople especially, they just don't even think very much about this. And so you could ask them an ROI figure, they could not give you that number if their life depended on it. And don't sell your life here. Pay attention to your marketing and positioning of your business, but don't sell it here either. This is the highest end, and this is the lowest end. And you're going to want to be somewhere in the middle. Maybe one day you'll end up here with Tiffany, but the whole idea is to stretch your own thinking. What you charge is your department. It's you that has to kind of pay attention to this. And if you're going to figure out how in the world can I charge $100 an hour for doing calligraphy, everyone else here would sit down, especially when you're moving into it, and say, oh, hell, I can't charge $100 an hour. Ron, can you come on and talk a little bit about how hard it was for you the first time to walk in and ask for $100 an hour?
It really wasn't hard at all.
Really?
I started out at $75 an hour.
Okay.
And I've told this story about how I got to raise my price because of telling on air what I was going to charge, and I wasn't charging that. And because that was in my head what I really wanted to get, I walked in and I told them, I said, for the next event, I said, it's going to be $100 an hour, and they didn't bat an eye.
Bingo, just wham. I know it pushed Jose. It just was so hard for him to move up to $100 an hour for his custom engraving on wine and perfume. But isn't it fun when they don't even blink?
Well, it is fun, and I think the reason it didn't bother me is because Ken and you kept pushing into my head. That's where I should be, and I relied on your counsel and Ken's counsel, and they said, Ron, you're better than $75 an hour. You got to be at $100 an hour, and that's what I did.
Now Ken gets routinely beyond this now, doesn't he?
Yeah. The last I knew, this was a couple years ago, he was at $150 an hour, and I think he's beyond that now
I do too.
on his events.
Yeah. So you realize that it's you that gets to play with this number. It's you that has to determine it. It's you that has to live with it. Okay. And if you kind of have the mentality that, oh hell, I would be willing to do it for way less, that's when you really need to rethink your thinking. If you jump to that position quickly and say, well, I'd be willing to do it for way less than that, you're slitting your own throat. And that the marketplace is not how you want to approach the business efforts of it. When you can get a
Lou?
decent... Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that just, on pricing, it's a little thing that I did, and I think it might help people. Not so much. It's if you're doing something for a friend. I'm going to give you what I did. I put their name on a crystal glass, and I stippled it, which takes a lot longer than just engraving it in script. And with layout and everything, it took me between 10 and 15 minutes. So I was going to charge $65. But because it was a friend, I thought, well, gee, maybe I should discount it. And I thought, no, because that's the price they're going to tell people. So I made out an invoice for $65. On the front of the invoice, I wrote, because I value your friendship, this is a gift from me to you. Thank you. It did two things. It strengthened the bond of our friendship. They felt like they had to go out and spread the word. And if somebody asked them what it cost, they gave them the price on the invoice and not a discounted price.
So you maintained retail, and yet still did what you wanted to do with it.
Yep.
That's really good. That's really important to do. So in looking at everything you're going to look at with your pricing, and begin to realize that Brian Beatty, the first time he went into a national competition with the Forbes Museum for his carved eggshells, he won all 5 categories. He won every category they had in the judging, and was on a month at the Forbes Museum in New York. And he's won the Best of Show for the Best of State awards in the state of Utah sculpting 5, 6, 7 times in a row. And when you start out, you don't think that you can do that. But if you'll just remember these ranges, these kind of things where we've talked about Buster and Julie Warinsky, we've talked about their kind of work and their range of work, $1 million handmade knives, $8 million handmade pens, and you really have to start with the concept of staying in this $60 range. If you're below that and you're hovering in here, then we need to talk. We've got to find some way to kind of drop you up and get you into a position where your end goal would be what? Where would you like your work to be sold for? Is there any way you could see your stuff being in this incredible higher end position? When Nari started and our coaching with him to begin with, he was selling these pieces for $200 or $300. And now look at the kind of price ranges that he's in. He does lots of exhibits. He has lots of shows. He's doing exactly like Sam Luth. He's going in exactly the same, and so's Ben Folk. Instead of a wood turner, it's a Ben Folk piece. Instead of a wood carving, it's a Nari Stafford piece. And he's cast them in glass now. I haven't even looked at the price here, but I'm sure it's $40,000 piece. And he started at 3. Over the years, my personal goal has been to help each of you grow in the quality of your work and the quality of your business, and that the business is finally paying the bills and doing what you want with it. If it's not, then we need to sharpen the saw and sharpen the pencil and move it further forward. When Darwin started out, we sold his first piece for double what he was charging, was $300, and I jumped the price to $600 right off the bat. Now he's routinely in the $15,000 per piece range. And it really needs to be measured by all 8 factors. You cannot price something like this in the normal routine way. It's just not how much time it takes, because everybody will say, how much time does it cost? If someone asks you how much time does it take to do something, they're in the bottom half of the economy. They're worried about the price, and so they're trying to see, is that price worth it? And if you can kind of see what goes on and where Darwin's going in his upper end range, I'm trying to get him to price really high now, because he really is in a position where he could do that. He could literally play with the name and the reputation to the point that it's just scary what happens in the world of art. And if you can kind of realize that that's what you're ultimately playing with, is about the best niche in the entire economy, move your life from hell if I know to how do I do it well to what you ought to do is get better at it. Don't let yourself get caught in this low non-perception of value kind of thing. This piece was done for an $8 million addition on a home. This guy says this is his most valuable piece in his life. Now, he owns a bunch of Norman Rockwell paintings, originals, but he likes that piece. This one of Craig's went into a $13 million home. Did 20 carvings for that one house. I had a lady one time see the door at the show we had at a show, and she says, how much is that? And I said, 36. And she said, oh, well, 3,600, yeah, that's a little expensive. But when I told her 36,000, I thought she was going to faint. This one is now priceless. This one here, I don't think you've got enough money to get it. It won the national championships several years ago, and Craig is the first artist to win both first and second place in a nationally ranked competition. This was at the head of the staircase. Beautiful big staircase in that major home. And I've got the videos of him installing it. Someday I need to get those posted up so you can all watch that moment. Keith went over with him and I took the camera. And we put that crusty old bird at the top of the staircase. So you can either go at it on your own or you can get some help. Success is not final, but failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that matters. Don't know how you can say it any better than that. I think the membership in the I&E network will just continue to be better and better, worth more and more, and our relationship in helping you succeed is what we're after the most. I do a course a couple of times a year, 10 days of magic, or I do 5 days of custom engraving to set a studio up. Then I have some courses on the sandblasting for a couple of days, and then if you like, also airbrushing. And you can start an entire new career for your retirement based on these individual 10 days. And Tammy can help you kind of get things arranged if that's something that you're interested in, and having us help you pursue this master's course. Why, get a hold of Tammy, and we have a lot of discounts when we try and help coach you at a distance. I've always been curious how some seem to pick things up and move them forward, and then other people just can't seem to break their ice to save their butt. And it's usually right here. They just will not move to the point of having someone else help them. I think I've taught over 3,000 students now, and it's really amazing the difference to those that will come in and try and see what they can accomplish when they just don't realize how quick and easy it is to do the same kind of thing. And airbrushing is the most unique. If I got an airbrush in my hand early, I probably would never have been another company. So as we grow our success stories, put yourself here. Please don't back off until you're one of the I&E network masters. It is really worthwhile in the long haul. If you need help with anything going on, get a hold of Tammy. She's available at the 800 number. That 800 number has been on for 32 years now. 32 years straight, the exact same 800 number. This is how to reach Tammy at Profitable Hobbies, and me if you need something, an individual counsel from me individually. So, this is the year. There's a few of you in our circle that are very close now, getting right up on this potential for you individually. And if you can sense at all your role in fitting in that position, because to me, a master's title is the beginning of a really great career. You've put everything in place. You've got a good little business around you now. You know how to price things. You know how to upscale market. And you're literally working on an individual brand. That's the time for you to really pour it on from that point on. Okay? All right, troops. Where is that button right there? Come on now. Show how to. Can't get it to back off. There we go. There we go. Any individual question before we finish tomorrow night, we'll start talking about everything. So if you've got some questions, I would prefer to do most of it tomorrow night and have that fit into the rehashing of what we're doing here. Yeah, go ahead, Lance.
Since I am going to town tomorrow, I just wanted to mention one thing that was brought up. I thought it was really great. When some I can't even remember who told me to say this, and I used it ever since. Somebody asks you how long did it take to do that, I just tell them 10 years.
Yep, that's the right answer. That's the right answer. Half a lifetime. Because that really is. That's all they're looking for. They're low-end people. You can split the economy in half real easy. And when we get into upscale marketing, you're going to see this quickly, because the bottom half of the economy can't afford what we're playing with. They can't afford to pay you enough for your time to justify you doing anything for it in almost every category. And the first time they say to you, how much does this cost or how long did it take you, and that comes up in the conversation quickly, they're definitely in the bottom half. And so you deal with them whatever you want, but you know quickly what's coming and what's happening with that. And so I often will say the same thing. I've been at it 30 years. What do you say, Jose? You got in tonight, bud. Good to have you here. Jose's one of our masters in our program. And how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, I was able to get in there on the YouTube, was watching it all along, and I saw an opportunity to get in, so I took it.
Good boy. Good to have you here. You've learned quite a bit about pricing in the last few years, haven't you?
Yes, I have. And like Lance said, you know, I guess we must be thinking about the same thing, because people when they ask me, how long is it going to take you to, or how long does it take to do the carving? He says, well, you know, it's about 10 years.
I think I got that from you, Jose. I think you told me that years ago.
It's a good answer.
So, yeah, and I don't know who I heard it from as well, you know, because, you know, you can't expect to have it done, you know. I hate giving people a deadline, you know, and right now when I quote a carving job, I tell them it's going to be anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. Yeah. You know, so, oh, okay, well, great. You know, because if I tell them it's going to take me maybe a week, you know, I said, well, they don't see the perceived value of it. But if I give them 4 to 8 weeks, you know, and that gives me a little bit of time, you know, in case I have shows coming along, and that 8 week, or I mean, the 2 weeks that I quoted comes through, and you know they're going to be calling me, hey, where's the stock? And so you told me 2 weeks. So then you say, well, start making excuses. I got shows, I got things. So what I do is I just give them, anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks, and I'll call you when it's ready.
It just dawned on me, I have one thing that I've not brought up in this whole thing, and it's a little bit what you've just said here, Jose. When I'm pricing or I'm talking about timing, I like to give a range. I will keep it somewhat close, but if you say 4 to 6 weeks or 4 to 8 weeks to have it done, or you price something from 8,500 to 8,900, someone like that, that's a pretty nice way to lay down and test the water in the early part of the conversation on pricing or timing. Give them a range. And then if they have a budget, they'll say, oh, that's a little more than I thought I could do. Then I've got some flexibility that I can kind of work with till I get the price that will actually work. But I really like pricing with a range. I think it's just, I'll have to add it in for next year because it really does give me a lot of advantage. Okay, gang, been great to sit down and visit with you again. This is a long couple of sessions, but there's so much involved. If you didn't get anything more than those 8 variables, just do not. Every time Jose ran into a whole new pricing world with his projects, this new large-scale stuff that he's doing, and at first you're just at a loss. Even though you've done a lot of other things, there's always this new possibility of, oh, good heavens, now what do I charge? And I've waded in here with my crystal work for years. Every time I do something, I have to go back through that process of measuring the factors against what I think it really ought to be retail. Then I think you end up in pretty good position. If you just keep guessing and just keep throwing mud on the wall, you're going to have a long, hard road to becoming a successful artist. Any other comment anybody else wants to make? We'll call her tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night. We'll talk about everything and go back through it all and visit about everything. Thank you very much.
I move that we discuss this with our pillows.
Yes. Oh, that's a great idea, Mel. My pillow is calling me right now.